Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Hangout on Air on interstitial ads, best practices, and implementation guidelines. Today on the call, you have Hung Ali, who is our AdMob technical specialist, as well as me, Prateek Bajaj, the AdMob monetization specialist. Now, for today's topics, we will be going over a quick introduction on interstitials, which I'm sure all of you in the room do know already about. Um, then the next topic is going to be about the common reasons for policy warnings and how can you fix these implementation issues so that you stay policy compliant. We're then going to be talking about some of the show rate issues or signals of interstitial problems on the AdMob reports and how you can fix the same. And lastly, we'll be covering about how do you optimize interstitial performance with Firebase. All right, so let's get started with our first topic, which is about interstitials ads introduction. Now, we all sitting over here do know that interstitial ads are larger ads which allow for premium engagement with higher CPMs and exponentially higher CPMs in comparison to banners. Also, users prefer full-page interstitial ads compared to paying for apps or banner ads. Another benefit of interstitials is that users control for to skip non-relevant ads. And approximately 50% of app developers already use interstitial ads. Now, in terms of optimal implementations, what are some of the key best practices you can keep in mind? Now, keep in mind that some of the optimal implementations we recommend are that you could probably place an interstitial between a horizontal swipe, or possibly after a level is over in a particular game, or after a few pages, such as 3 to 5 pages of content, or in natural breaks. But the key information that you need to remember is that an interstitial ad should not disrupt user experience and should not show up accidentally without any user-generated action. Now, we're going to talk about this in detail in our next slides. So based on some of the feedback that we've received from our developers, which is you guys, from various channels, on receiving policy notifications because of interstitial placement, we wanted to talk to you about what are some of the common reasons for these policy warnings that you receive for interstitial ads and how can you fix the same. So it's fairly simple, right? Some of the common reasons for policy warnings include unexpected launch of interstitials, ads on app loading or exit pages, recurring interstitials, or interstitials leading to impacting the navigation. Now let's go into each one of these into detail. All right, so the first piece being unexpected launch of interstitial ads. Now, what does this mean? What this means is that an interstitial ad is showing up without any user-generated action, which is going to lead to negative user experience as well as may lead to an accidental click. So do not surprise your users with the interstitial ads. Now let's get into some examples of an unexpected launch of an interstitial ad. Now, if you look at the screen over here, the example is that a user clicks on the app icon on the home page of their phone device. The home screen of the app shows up. And without any user-generated action, an interstitial ad pops up. Upon closing the interstitial ad, the user sees the home screen of the app again. Now, there are two violations over here that can be seen. The first is that an interstitial ad was launched unexpectedly, as there was no user-generated action yet on the home screen of the app. The second is that upon closing the interstitial, a user was seeing the same screen that they were seeing before the interstitial. So two golden rules to remember over here. First, that never launch an interstitial ad unexpectedly without any user-generated action. The second, the page before the interstitial and after the interstitial ad should always be different. Let's look at another example. Now, what happens over here? A user opens the app, the user goes onto the home page of the app, and a user chooses an action. A next page loads, which is fine. Now, on the next page, an interstitial ad pops up automatically without any user-generated action. And again, upon closing the interstitial ad, the next page that the user is seeing is the same as the previous page. Again, two violations over here. What are the two violations over here? The first being that even though the user has chosen an action on the home page, and when the next page loads, the user has not selected an action yet, and an interstitial ad is popping up without any user-generated action. And the second violation is that the page before the interstitial and after the interstitial is the same. So two golden rules to remember, again, stressing upon the fact that no interstitial should show up without any user-generated action. And the second piece is that the page before an interstitial and after an interstitial should always be different. All right. So how can you go ahead and fix this violation? Now, one way to go ahead and fix this violation is that when a user opens an app and a user chooses an action, you show an interstitial ad. Upon closing the interstitial ad, the next page is loaded. Now, what you note over here is, and how you're becoming policy compliant over here is by doing two things. The first is that the interstitial ad only showed up when the user chose a particular action on the home page of the app. The second piece is that upon closing the interstitial ad, the next page that loaded is different from the previous page. So again, to wrap this particular topic up, keep in mind two particular golden rules. The first, never show an interstitial without any user-generated action, and do not surprise your users with unexpected launches of interstitials. Number two, the page before an interstitial and after an interstitial should always be different. All right, now let's talk about our second most common violation that we notice across the board, which is interstitial ads loading at app loading or exit pages. Now, what does this mean? What this means is that interstitial ads should only be placed within the app environment. Ads should not be placed in applications that are running in the background of the device or outside of the environment. And let me explain this to you in detail. Now, let's look at this particular scenario. What does this scenario mean? A user clicks on the app icon on the home page of their phone screen. The first step that happens is that an interstitial ad shows up, then an app loading screen, and then the home screen of the app. Now, this is a violation because the interstitial ad is showing up before the home screen of the app or before the app loading screen, which technically makes the interstitial being served outside of the app environment. So how can you possibly fix this? Now, we'll get into that within a minute, but let me also tell you on how this scenario is a violation on the exit page. Now, in this particular scenario, what's happening is a user is clicking on the button to exit the app, and then an interstitial ad shows up. Upon closing the interstitial, the home screen of the phone is shown. Now, what is the violation here? The violation, again, over here is that you are showing an interstitial ad outside the app environment, as upon closing the interstitial ad, a user is getting directed to the home screen of the app and not on a screen within the app. So make sure that you are not serving interstitial ads outside the app's environment. How can you possibly fix this violation? One way to fix this violation is that the user clicks upon the home page, an app loading screen shows up, and then you show an interstitial ad. Upon closing the interstitial ad, the home screen of the app shows up. Now, this makes you placing the interstitial ad policy compliant, as the app loading screen first shows up, followed by an interstitial ad, which makes the interstitial ad being served within the app environment. All right, so we've covered two most common violations till now, right? The first one being about making sure that there is no unexpected launch of an interstitial. And then we also covered over there a part where we said that the page before and after an interstitial should never be the same. The second violation we spoke about is about making sure that interstitial ads are served within the app environment. And the most common scenarios that we see where violations are done over here are when the interstitial is shown before the app loading screen or after the user exits from the app. And we also spoke about how this can be fixed. Now let's talk about another third common scenario, which is recurring interstitials. Now, what does this really mean? What this means is that ads should not be placed in a way that they interfere with navigating or interacting within the app's core content and functionality. Now, let's talk about this through an example. Now, what's going on over here? A user chooses an action on the main screen of the app, an interstitial ad shows up. A user closes the interstitial ad, and then a second interstitial ad shows up. And upon closing the second interstitial ad, the next page is loaded. Now, what is the violation here? The violation here is that a user saw the first interstitial ad, and upon closing the interstitial ad, you're showing them another interstitial ad, which leads to very negative user experience and disrupts their flow in the app. So do not show recurring interstitials, as this is a violation of our policies. Now, the last most common violation that I want to speak to you about is how interstitial ads, if not placed correctly, could impact navigation. Now, apps should not trigger an interstitial ad every time a user clicks within the app. And this is something that is very important, as you cannot be placing an interstitial ad upon every user click within the app, as it leads to very bad user experience, as well as could possibly lead to accidental clicks and the user probably not wanting to return to your app based on the fact that you are impacting their navigation within the app. So what's one example of this? One example of this is a user chooses an action, an interstitial ad shows up. The user closes that particular interstitial ad, and then user chooses another action. Again, an interstitial ad shows up. Now, what you need to understand is that it's very important that interstitial ads should not be triggered every single time when a user clicks within the app. And a recommendation that we have is possibly that you should be having the same done after 3 to 5 pages of content or after 3 to 5 user-generated actions to make sure that their flow within the app is not impacted. So that's what we had to talk about, some of the most common violations, where I wanted to walk you through the 4 scenarios which we spoke about, where the first one being that please make sure that an interstitial is not launched unexpectedly without any user-generated action, and that a page before an interstitial and after an interstitial should always be different. The second being that interstitial ads should always be served within the app environment. The third being that do not have recurring interstitials. And the fourth being that do not have an interstitial on every single click within your app, as this could impact a user's navigation and could lead to bad user experience as well as accidental clicks. Now, I'm going to be passing on over to Hung, who's our AdMob technical specialist, who's going to be talking to you about how do you go up and integrate the best practice for ad flow to avoid policy violations. Over to you, Hung.
Okay, thank you, Pratik. So as Pratik already introduced me, I'm Hung. I am kind of technical support for the AdMob side. So, okay, I will guide you about how to do the best practice for the ad flow to avoid all the policies issue. So let's say user stay on the current page. There are 2 things that can trigger the interstitial. The first thing is also user action. Let's say user click some button, user finish the game level, or user want to change the other screen. That's user action. And the second thing that can be used for trigger is some kind of auto callback. Let's say for the ad listener, when you finish loading an ad or the last is not failed, the second auto callback maybe the network callback or maybe some kind of timer you have in your app. So the first thing to remember is that only show the interstitials based on the user action, never use the auto callback. That's the thing you should remind yourself. So every time you do some action on your screen, that's the way, that's the point where you can check and show the interstitial. So after you do some action, you can check if the interstitial is loaded. You can show interstitial. If not, don't do anything and just jump to the target page. And if you cancel the interstitial, please wait until the ads close before you change to the target page. So that's the 2 first important things. The first thing is only show interstitials on user action. And the second important thing is wait until the ad close before you do the next action. Okay, the last thing, how can you have the ads to ready to show every time user action? So please try to preload your ads as soon as possible. Maybe right after user open your app, you can preload an interstitial. So just interstitial will be ready to show after user do the next action in your app. Is there any question for the, okay, I will jump to the next thing. There are some kind of signal about the show rate. You can check on the AdMob report to make sure that interstitial don't have any issues.
Again, on this particular part, I would definitely like our developers who are listening to us today to focus a lot more, because it's very important that you have high show rates for better performances, and we should be focusing on this area a lot more. So over to you, Hung, again.
Okay, so the correct flow of showing interstitial is that you try to preload an interstitial. You wait to the right moment, then you show the interstitial, and you wait for that to be closed. After the interstitial closed, you can try to load more to ready to show. So maybe in the perfect one, the number of impressions should equal to the number of match requests minus 1. So I can show you here some optimal value for the show rate. Let's say you have one impression, you will need too much request. For two impression, you need three much request. So you can see in the table here, the perfect sell rate should be between 15 up to 80%.
Great. So I'd like to stress over here again that it's very important for our developers to understand that they need to have high show rates for better performances. And this can only be achieved by making sure that the ratio for impressions to match requests is always good. So make sure that if your show rate is between 50 to 80% between 50 to 80% for interstitials, and do follow the logic mentioned by Hung.
Yeah, so there are some kind of problem you can check with your sell rate. If your sell rate is too low, let's say it's less than 40%, that means three kind of issue here. The first thing is that you can maybe preload on your ads already, but user doesn't reach the placement to show the interstitial. That means your interstitial has very, very low viewability. So I can submit you to try to find more placement. Let's say when the app open, when the app exists, or find more breakpoint between your page in the app to show the interstitial. And in the next session, I will show you how to use fiber A/B testing to find more placement to show the interstitial, but still keep maintaining your user experience. And also, if you want to show small interstitial, just make sure you take care of the policies. Show more, but keep the policy under safe. The second thing you can try is use. The second thing you can make this wrong is that you use multiple ad unit for one placement. This is very, very common case I see. A lot of websites do that. You shouldn't do that because if you try to use multiple ad units, you can hurt your app performance because you preload more interstitial. That means you use more memory of your app to load to keep the interstitial without showing them. So you should use only one ad unit for one placement. Please check the best practice. That practice already talked before about how to control preload and show the ad. The last thing you can maybe did wrong is that you preload too much. Let's say if you preload an ad and before you show ad, you try to preload again because you think that preload more may give you higher match rate or higher ECPM. That thing is completely wrong. After you preload an ad, you have about 60 minutes to show them. So please, after you have an ad, don't try to reload them again.
All right, thanks for that, Hung. Now, I'm going to focus on this one point again, that if your show rate is less than 40%, make sure that you follow the logic to fix it. And we hear this from a lot of our developers, right, that they use multiple ad units for one single placement. Please do not follow this as a practice like Hung said a minute ago. This can not only hurt your app's performance, but is also not good for your overall monetization performance. Please make sure that you use only one ad for one single placement, and do go ahead and preload and show the ads.
One of the reasons I hear that your publisher they want to use multiple ad unit for one placement because you think that if the first ad unit is failed to load, the second ad unit may be good to receive the ads. That's not true. Even for the one ad unit, if you load an ad fail, you can wait for a few seconds and reload again with the same ad unit. It works the same way if you use multiple ad unit. So please, only one ad unit is enough for you to preload an ad. You don't need to use multiple ad unit for one placement.
Thanks, Hung.
The second problem is that show rate is too high. You may think that show rate high is good, but it's not. If your show rate is more than 80%, that means some of the problem here. You may show too many ads. As you can see in my optimal value for the show rate, if you have more than 80% of show rate, that means you show more than 6 impressions per session per user. That's not a good thing. You should check their user experience. Maybe you can try to implement Firebase to monitor your user retention, user engagement time, because I believe that showing more than 6 impressions per user may let your user to leave your app. And also showing too many interstitials that may lead you to violate the policy. So take care of that. The second thing, the second reason lead to the high show rate. Maybe you forget to put in the ads. That means you show the ad right after you've done loading the ads, and also it may lead to show ads suddenly and violate the policies. And also, if you don't do the preloading, you may don't have the ad ready to show when you have the right moment to show that. So please check the best practice about to control the preload and show ads. The last thing about the show rate too high is maybe you show the ads on app exit. So the follow for you is when upload, you preload an ad, then you show, and then you show edit app, you more loading ads. One, the number of impression and match request is 1 and 1. So it's not a good thing to do because you have a very, very few chance to solve the interstitial. So please try to do the 5-bay A/B test to find more placement to solve your interstitial to increase the number of impressions you can show to your user. And also, if you want to solve the interstitial when app exists, please check the policy to avoid any problem.
All right, so our next topic is going to be about how do you optimize interstitial performances with Firebase. Over to you, Hung.
Okay, so about the interstitial performance, there are two things that you can optimize. The first thing is frequencies. How much impression you can show to your user. And the second thing is placement. How and where is the placement you can show interstitial in your app. So a quick introduction about Firebase. Firebase is a Google tool that provide you a lot of features so you can grow your app. Some of the good features about Firebase may be the remote configs, A/B testing, and the analytics. In terms of today, I don't have enough time to show you all the features of Firebase, but I will show you a little bit about the A/B testing with remote configs. So why do we need to control the frequencies? If you're showing too many apps to your user, you hurt your user experience, and then user want to leave your app. That's not a good thing. If you show too little apps, you can keep your user, but the revenue per user is not good. So your total revenue is not good again. So it's very important to control the frequency of showing ads to balance between your user experience and monetization. Okay, so there are a few ways you can control the interstitial frequency. The first thing is that you can set a fixed interval time inside your apps by using the code I'm showing you here. So let's say every time you want to show an interstitial, you check the last time you saw and just go in time. If the past time is more than 2 minutes, you can show the interstitial. So the advantage point is that it's very, very easy to implement. But the disadvantage is that you need to update the app every time you want to change the interval values. And also, it's very, very difficult for you to find the best value for the interval time. The second way to control the frequency is that you can use the frequency capping on AdMob console. It's very, very easy to use. Just enable frequency capping and then put the right value you want to use. The first part is that there's no need to do anything in your code, but also it had a lot of disadvantage point that you are unable to change the interval time in your app, and also you don't know what is the best value for the interval time. So the last way and also the best way I suggest you is try to use Firebase remote config to get this value. So let's say by using remote config, you can return a value to different value for different user. So every time you want to show interstitial, you can check the past time from the last time you're showing. But right now, you don't need to fix 2 minutes in your code. You can get the interval time by using Firebase remote config. By using Firebase remote config, you can also do the A/B testing to figure out what is the best value for the interval time. So if you want to test the interstitial frequency with Firebase testing, you need to do 3 steps. The first one is create a parameter in Firebase remote config. The second thing is that implement the parameter fetching in your app to get the value from Firebase remote config. And the last thing, you can run Firebase experiment to test the frequency value. For example, I create a parameter in Firebase remote config named interstitial interval, and I put the default value here for 2 minutes, which is 130 seconds. And then in the code, I have a function to fetch the value, to fetch the interval value. You can see here the function get interstitial interval time. I use remote config to get the value from my Firebase remote config. And then in the function show interstitial, I use that value to check if my past time is more than that value, I will show the interstitial. Otherwise, I don't do anything. For the next step, I will run an experiment on the Firebase remote config to A/B test the frequency values by doing 4 steps here. I will guide you step by step. For the first step, you can set the target user and your goal matrix. In this example, I will target 100% of my user. And because I want to balance my user experience with my monetization, So the metric, the result metric I will pick here is user retention and also the ad impression and ad click. I will create three variants here. The first control group, I will keep the interstitial frequencies as the default value 2 minutes. And the lower frequency, I will change the value to 3 minutes, which is 180 seconds. And for the higher frequency, I will change this value to only 1 minute. That means I'm showing more interstitial for this group. After you create a variant, you can take a quick look about what you want to do and then start the A/B test experiment on Firebase. Firebase may need you to keep the experiment running for a whole week, and after that, you will have a result looking like this one. For the control group, there's nothing changed. For the lower frequency group, you can see here maybe you have more ad impression, more ad click, but also keep the good retention rate. So that means the lower frequency group is perform better than the control group. It's one of the things you can do with the Firebase. The second thing you can do is try to optimize the placement for your interstitial. So let's say you want to show more interstitial in your app. How can you do that? First thing, you need to find all the placement where and when you can show the interstitial. And then each placement may have a different impact, let's say for the CTR, for the show rate, for the ACPM. How can you test that? You can use Firebase to test that. This is step by step. How can you do that? The first thing, find all the possible placement in your app and decide what is a placement that have biggest potential, and then try to show interstitial on this placement. And then create a parameter in Firebase remote config, and also create different ad unit for different placement. Why you need to do that? Because you want to check the CTRs, ACPM for each placement. By creating different ad unit, you will be able to do that. And then implement the parameter fetching again in your code to get the value from Firebase remote config and then show the interstitial in the right placement. In this example, I will show you how to test two placements. Let's say you want to show interstitial when user start a new game and when your user have the game over. So I will create two parameters in the Firebase remote config. The first one is show interstitial start game, and the second one is show interstitial game over. To be easier to check the ECPM, the CTR for each placement, I will create two different ad units. One is interstitial game over, and one is interstitial start game. And then in my code, I need to fetch two values of the remote config value here. You can see here I have two functions to fetch two different values for key show interstitial start game and for the key show interstitial game over. And then I have two different functions to show the interstitial in two different placements, on start new game and on game over. In each function, I go first, I check the Boolean value to see if I can show or not. If I can show, I call the function to show interstitial. And then the same thing, I create four different variant group. You can see here in the first group, I don't show interstitial for both placement. On the second group named start game only, I only show interstitial on user start new game. On the three group, I only show interstitial when user end the game. And the last group, I will return the value to show interstitial for both placement. And then you can run experiment to give the value back to your user. And then after 1 week, as I said before, you can have the value about the ad impression, ad clicks, and also user retention for each group and decide what is the best placement for you. Okay, so if you want to run the Firebase A/B testing to optimize your interstitial, please keep in mind three important things here. The first thing, you should run experiment one by one to avoid confusion. Let's say the first thing, you can test the interstitial frequency first, and then you can test the placement. And the last thing is that in my sample, I only target 100% of my users to run the test. But for you, you may need to modify your test for your target market to get a better result. For example, you may want to show less ad in the country with lots of IP user and high value user for example, Korea, Japan, or US. And you may show more ads in the country with less IP user, Indonesia, India, and Vietnam. That's all from my part.
Thank you, Hong. All right. So, for our developers out there today, thank you so much for joining us. And just to summarize, I'd like to emphasize that some of the topics we covered today included on how interstitials can benefit to increase your app revenue. Second, what are the most common violations for interstitials and how the same can be fixed, and what are the best practices to do so. So please make sure you do remember that. We spoke about four most common violations. The first one being unexpected launch of interstitials, which also had a subsection that the page before and after the interstitial should always be different. The second one being that an interstitial should always be served within the app environment. The third being that do not have recurring interstitials. And the fourth being that do not have interstitial ads upon every click or user generated action within the app, as this could lead to impacting the navigation within the app for the user and lead to a very bad user experience. After this, the topic that we covered is on how do you make sure that you improve your interstitial overall performance by making sure that you are having an optimal show rate, which is anything between 50 to 80%. And we also spoke about on how you should not be having multiple ad units for a single placement, as this is going to impact not only your performance metrics for the app, but also hurt the overall app. And then we spoke about how you can use Firebase to go ahead and optimize your interstitials even better. With that, I would like to thank you all for spending your time with us this afternoon to getting to know more about interstitials. We will be sending the video recording to you as well as the feedback form. We request you to please fill in the feedback form so that we go ahead and understand on how we can serve you even better. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for giving us the time. We really hope that you have a great holiday season, and we look forward to meeting you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.